It is exactly 9:37 a.m. South African time. We are going to Japan now, and we will be talking to Professor Takahashi, Professor Saul Takahashi, based in Osaka, and he is an international human rights and humanitarian lawyer. We're going to be looking at, once again, the ceasefire, which is now faltering because, as we know, the US has attacked Iran in the Strait of Hormuz. They have retaliated on Kuwait and Bahrain, who are condemning the attacks. And of course, they're not seeing the bigger picture, are they? That the US has actually struck Iran in the islands, I think it is, in the Strait of Hormuz. How do you see all of this playing out? A very good morning to you, Professor Takahashi, regarding the ceasefire. Just when we all thought it was safe to go out, it seems as if tensions have arisen again. Are you with us? There you go. I couldn't see the
Yes,
picture.
I can see. Oh, okay.
Very good morning in my part of the world. Welcome. I think it's late afternoon or evening in Japan. Am I correct?
I think it would be. I'm actually physically in Abu Dhabi right now, so I'm not in Japan.
Okay,
but I am still based in Osaka, like you mentioned.
Sure. Do you feel safe there? Do you feel safe in Abu Dhabi?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in March earlier this year, when everything was really a little bit more hairy, then we were getting emergency alerts on our phones several times every day. We hear sort of sounds of explosions up in the sky that generally were, I believe, the sounds of missiles or drones being intercepted. So, that was the extent of it. I mean, honestly, we never really felt threatened in that way. I mean, look, I've been in Palestine and I've had hairier experiences before. So really, it wasn't such a big deal. But now life is pretty much going in normal. I'm just here for a very short time, and I'm going to be back in Osaka in about a week.
So what is the feelings of the people on the ground? We do know that the governments concerned have obviously put out very strong statements, regarding Iran having struck their countries. What's the mood like? What do you suppose is going to happen now? Iran clearly has acted once again in self-defense. And as the ceasefire falters or breaks down completely, do you think the situation regarding another ceasefire, will there be room for another ceasefire, and the impact globally, obviously?
Sure. Honestly, I'm not that concerned with what's taking place now, or with what's been taking place in the Strait of Hormuz ever since the ceasefire came into place. And I say that, I mean, obviously we should be concerned, and we should, the implications are serious if something really bad happens. But I don't think that something really bad will happen. And I say that because the two parties here, i.e. the US and the Iranians, they want an agreement in force. They want, you will see that neither of them have really threatened in any kind of serious way. And I'm putting aside Donald Trump's sort of outbursts on social media. Neither of them have ever really said in a serious way that they were leaving the ceasefire and that they were abandoning it and we're going back to a state of hostilities. Both sides really want this to work. The U.S. is clearly, Donald Trump is clearly very, very desperate to sign on to anything that the Iranians are going to present him. And the Iranians too, they've had a lot of damage through these attacks. So they want this to end, but they want this to end on terms that on their terms. I think what we really need to be concerned about is Lebanon and also Gaza, of course, because the Israelis do not want this, do not want the ceasefire. They want war to continue. They want perpetual war and perpetual conflict and perpetual impunity for them and for their massacres of civilians. So that's why they're keeping on doing that kind of stuff in Lebanon. They continue to escalate things. They continue to seize territory and to massacre civilians. So that's really I think, what we need to be really concerned about. Now, the Americans seem to be trying to placate the Israelis by strong-arming the Lebanese into, I think the end game is to joining the quote-unquote Abraham Accords. So basically, diplomatic relations with Israel. So far, that hasn't happened, and I very much hope it won't. But really, the main issue here is, how are the Israelis going to try to sabotage the ceasefire? How are they going to try to trick or push or cajole the Americans into resuming hostilities against Iran? They want to fight this war until the last American. That's the fact of it. So, we have to see what's going to happen there. That's, I think, what we really need to be concerned about.
Do they want another Pearl Harbor to play out? I often wonder about that. Having said that, I'm thinking also about the Americans having bombed the Iran's southern coast. Iran obviously has called it brutal attacks, and they have gone on to say that it has violated the ceasefire outlined in the MOU. The Americans then have defended their position by suggesting that a Panama-flagged vessel was carrying more than 2 million barrels of crude oil when it was attacked as it transited near the strait early on Saturday. So, you're getting these different versions from each side defending their positions. The ceasefire should have obviously avoided. With the ceasefire in place, this should not have happened. Why do we suppose it did happen after all? That's the one issue. You also made reference to the Abraham Accords. And interestingly enough, I spoke just before your interview. I was talking with Dr. Van Heerden, who is an international relations analyst. And he said that as far as he's concerned, the Abraham Accords, Lebanon is not going to sign, and as far as he's concerned, it's not going to happen at all. It's drowned in the water, so to speak. So, your response to all of that?
Well, in terms of the Americans trying to cajole Lebanon into joining the Abraham Accords, or otherwise recognizing, opening normal diplomatic relations with Israel, I very much hope not. But, the Americans have basically the whole idea, and this is something which the Israelis have presented to the Americans, I'm sure, and which the Americans have adopted as their policy, is to separate the Iran, what's happening in terms of hostilities with Iran, from the Lebanon, from what's happening in Lebanon, and to continue to allow Israel to illegally occupy sovereign Lebanese territory, to massacre civilians, and to basically act with impunity, act with the kind of impunity that they have enjoyed for decades and decades. The whole situation in Lebanon is, of course, very complicated because it involves Hezbollah, which is not a party to this agreement that was signed in Washington. But I do think that's the end game. I mean, that's been the end game of American governments for a long time, even before Trump came prancing along with his so-called Abraham Accords. I mean, to get the Arab nations to normalize relations with Israel, and to have the whole Palestine issue sort of swept under the carpet. That's always been the idea here. And here they see a chance. They see a chance of doing it. I doubt that they will be successful. But look, I think it was a few weeks ago, perhaps, when on one of these, just another one of these outbursts and ridiculous kind of things that Trump was saying on social media, where he said that all the countries of the Gulf should be required to sign on to the Abraham Accords because we, the Americans, have brought peace to the Gulf, or some kind of just completely outrageously stupid statement like that. And what we see, I've seen reports that he mentioned that in some kind of video call to the leaders of many of the Gulf nations. Although I think some of the other countries, I think Pakistan was also there, and there was just this stunned silence at this, just at this outrageous stupidity. I mean, I'm sure these, I have pity for the leaders of these countries, or the representatives, who are, they must have been thinking, what is this guy thinking? But it is unfortunate Lebanon is not in that group. I mean, Lebanon is in a much more vulnerable situation because it is being illegally occupied by Israel. It's having civilians being massacred every day, and the Lebanese government itself is very vulnerable to pressure from the United States and from the West in general. So I think I'm not saying that they're going to be successful. I certainly hope that they won't. Because you don't reward a country that is in the midst of committing genocide. This is not something you do. But I do believe that's the end game. And certainly, if you look at the agreement that was signed in Washington, I mean, it doesn't mention the Abraham Accords, but it does. It provides hints and slowly prodding the Lebanese in that direction. One thing I, as an international human rights lawyer, find particularly offensive is that it says that basically it requires Lebanon to refrain from any kind of quote unquote offensive or campaign against Israel on the international stage or in international fora. I believe that was the language, hinting at Lebanon, you can't ask the ICC or UN inspectors to come into your country and document Israeli war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Goodness.
So that's that is the thing, and Lebanon is in a very vulnerable position. Hezbollah is in a very vulnerable position in many ways. I mean, for sure, the Israeli notion that they are going to just bulldoze over Hezbollah is going to be as successful as the notion that they're just going to bulldoze over Hamas. It's not going to happen. They're not going to win. It's just not going to happen. So that's very clear. But it could still, there could still be a lot of very, very sad days ahead for Lebanon. What's happening there. But back to what's happening here, again, there's a lot of tough talk that's been exchanged. There's a lot of people often call these things tit for tat attacks, and I think that's a pretty accurate assessment of what's happening here. I do think this is mainly part of the negotiation process of the ceasefire and what sort of framework we're going to be looking at before. But one of the things that has to be said is that the language of the ceasefire agreement, which you will recall was not even made public until really the 11th hour, the last minute, it's very vague. And international agreements sometimes are vague because the whole idea is to sort of build trust, and then things that the details will be sorted out as they go along. Obviously, there's no trust whatsoever between the U.S. and Iran. I would even say, I think somebody like Trump actually probably trusts the Iranians or respects them, in a sort of twisted way. But certainly the Iranians have no trust whatsoever for the United States, and for sure they should not. In the midst of negotiations, 2 times now, they've been attacked. Donald Trump, when my prime minister, the Japanese prime minister, visited Washington, this is about a month ago, maybe a little bit more, he actually bragged about having conducted this surprise attack on Iran. He compared it with the Japanese. You remember this. What Japan did in Pearl Harbor, and you say, wasn't this smart of us? Ha ha ha. You look at this kind of stuff and you think, how are we ever going to trust this guy? And this is why I also get back to Lebanon, because one of the cruxes of the matter here are the Americans going to rein in the Israelis? Because this is really the big thing. Are the Americans going? Yeah,
absolutely. That's the question. That's the all-important question, not only between you and I, but I think people all around the world. And you kind of wonder, goodness, how come it hasn't happened up to now? When is it going to happen so that this madness can stop for once and for all? But that's where we have to leave it. I look forward to talking with you again sometime in the future. Keep safe, go well, and God bless.
Okay,
it is exactly 9:51. We are heading to the final interview of the morning. Stay with us, and we will be joined by Imran Muqaddam. So stand by.